Hello out there, and today we are going to be taking a look at an automatic knife from Protech. This one is called the Godson, and I have a couple disclaimers, caveats, let's say, before we get into anything. If you are new to the channel, I want to make sure that you understand that I am not an automatic expert, and I'm certainly not a guy with a lot of Protech experience. So the kind of viewpoint and perspective that you're going to get in this video today is from someone who's not all that well versed when it comes to autos. So comparing them from one brand to another, saying this is great compared to that, I'm not really going to be able to do that. I'm just going to be judging the knife that's in front of me. Now, that said, I am going to be sending this knife to my buddy Jeff Jewell to check out as soon as I'm done filming this video today, actually. So before this video is posted, he'll probably have it in hand. And he is a guy who, one, is a really good sharpener, and two, has a really deep understanding and has a ton of autos. So I will link to his video if he makes one about this video or about this knife. I'll link to his so that you can just go straight from here to that and get his take on the Protech Godson. But for me, yeah, this was a knife that I wasn't expecting to get because it came through a give a knife, take a knife pass round. It was one of the knives that came back to me. This previously belonged to Bearded Gear, and I've been looking to get a Protech. I've been looking to get, one of their autos because I'm really into, some of the other stuff that they're doing and trying to branch out a little bit. This past year, I got to handle the Malibu and the Mordax, and I really like, just how good an action they have on their non-automatic knives, their manual ones. But, the Kershaw Launch 11 sort of changed things for me, and the Microtech LUDT did as well, just my mindset, and I wanted to get an auto. I didn't necessarily want to get a stiletto that is quite so like stabby looking, but that's sort of how it came out, and I'm pretty darn happy with this knife, guys. So today we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about some of these details and all the things that I think you need to know, because I don't know everything, about this Protech Godson. So there is a Godfather. It is a much larger version. For me, that wouldn't be EDC friendly, so I'll just throw that out there now. When we're talking about size comparisons, the Godson, I think, is a perfect size, coming right in at 3 inches of cutting edge. So, I mean, that's pretty much right down the middle, about 7.5, a little bit more inches overall. So, yeah, I mean, pretty darn good as far as what I'm looking for in my size range. Here it is next to the mini grip. Here it is next to the PM2. And let's find another just common and popular knife to throw out next to it. One more size comparison, the 943. So that's what we have there. The weight on this knife is pretty agreeable, and that's one of the good things when you're working with a lot of autos and you have aluminum frames. You're not going to really go all that crazy heavy on weight. So I'm not sure if you guys can see that. 3.29 ounces on this. So, yep, it's agreeable, especially considering, how thick that frame is and those scales are. Would definitely be a lot heavier if it were a different material. So good that aluminum is so light. So let's take a look at the blade. So what we have here is a blade of 154 CPM 154 actually. So this is, I believe, the powder version. Oh no, it isn't. Okay, so well, rewind. This is 154 CM, so it is not the powder version, but it's a great steel, and it's a steel that I've had a ton of great experiences with, just with Benchmade and what they've done in the past with 154. So 0 issues with that. I'm trying to get this focused. I brightened it a little bit for a second. I might just have to insert a picture, but I really like the finish on the blade. It's like this deep stonewash. It's super attractive. Yeah, it just looks classy and good. And there, maybe you can see it in that, at that angle right there. Yeah, it is. It's pretty darn nice. It reminds me, it has a little less texture than the coating that the American Blade Works V4 that I handled had, but it is the closest thing to that I've seen, so pretty good there. As far as the grind, well, guys, I mean, if you're going to pick a knife up like this, you should have an understanding of what you're going to use it for, because this is a very thin, it does have a relatively, like, decent stock, but it's a very thin grind, and it gets thin because of the swedge, too, pretty far back from the actual tip. So super pointy, very acute, very stabby, as stated earlier. And so I don't know. I mean, I know 154 is a strong steel, but that said, like, if you're going to need a knife to pry with, this is definitely not the one, because with some knives, and I've broken the tips off of a few knives, you could break a tip right here. With this one being as thin as it is, you could break it pretty far back. I mean, it's it's just not meant for that. So, keep that in mind when you're picking this knife, not necessarily to buy, but to put in your pocket, depending on what you're going to need that day. Some people might have this and carry this as, hey, this is a tactical piece for me. I don't know. I mean, I don't carry just a tactical knife. If you do, this would be a really good small one, just for that reason, that it is so pointy and so good for piercing. When we take a look at the top, some of these stilettos will have sort of a double edge, and this one doesn't. So it's not ground all the way down, so this would not be an easy thing to make a double blade if you wanted to. Not really necessary for me. As far as cutting performance with the blade, I had zero problems. I mean, it's thin, it gets through stuff. It certainly isn't like, it certainly doesn't feel like the most durable beater, and so I wouldn't ever imagine that it should be used in that kind of capacity. But for just daily stuff around the house and breaking down a couple boxes, it's just fine. And actually, it's really good for opening packaging, just because of that blade profile. As we move on back, one thing that people knock on some of the stiletto style blades for is just, you have this like almost coffin shaped handle, and it might not be very ergonomic. And me wanting some kind of jimping, that was one of the things I thought, well, this just won't be very appealing when it comes to the ergos. And that's just not the case. It's comfortable. It's really comfortable. There's zero hot spots for me. It feels really good in the hand. One thing that could be an issue, and you can see it right there, is just on that aluminum, any kind of moisture in your hands. And being in Florida, that happens all the time. And generally being a sort of sweaty person, that happens all the time. So that's just one thing to be aware of. But I'm not using the knife in a capacity that it's ever going to be a problem. If this were a knife that I did need to use for 20 minutes at a time, then I'd think, well, maybe this wouldn't be the best thing for me, but that's not the case, and if you use it for a tactical application as well, like, that's probably not the case, or you might have gloves on, so no problem there. But as far as comfort goes and getting it to lock in, it's pretty darn good. We take a look at this aluminum here, and the aluminum is, it's really agreeable. I was sort of concerned with this knife when I got it, because I'd handled the Protech Malibu, and that aluminum coating just seemed to scratch anytime you did anything to it. You put it in your pocket, it nicked something, like it showed wear. And that, for me, honestly, it wasn't a terrible thing. It wasn't a bad thing. It does add character, but I was just, I don't necessarily want a piece like this that is almost more of a gents piece for me. Don't want it getting beat up. And to be completely forthright with you guys, and I got this knife, I thought I might keep it for a while and then probably move on from it. So I didn't want it to get damaged. And the good news is that this coating is holding up really well. I have carried this quite a bit. I've enjoyed the heck out of carrying it. And yeah, I haven't really seen much wear at all. So that is good. Maybe a little bit on the edges, but that's just going to happen eventually no matter what. All right. And then as we continue, let's just take a quick break to fire it open once or twice. Yeah, as we continue to go on back. All right. What we have at the back here is a pocket clip. It is a decent clip. Pretty long clip. It looks like one of the old Kershaws, to be honest. So it's a fine clip. I don't know. I haven't actually looked to see if there's any other 3-screw clips that would fit there as well. But for me, I wouldn't need that. I wouldn't worry about this knife and the clip. If I were going to keep it, and again, I still might, I wouldn't change it out at all. It's good. I think if you go too deep carry with this, it might be hard to get out of the pocket. And again, for some of the people who have specific intentions about carrying this knife, you might not want that. All right, so that is that. No real spot for a lanyard, which I have zero problem with. One thing to note, and again, this might just be a Protech noob talking here, but the hardware is not Torx hardware. It's just hex hardware. So make sure, I mean, probably everybody has about 8 hex drivers and bits around their house. So yeah, I mean, if you're a knife person, that's not really a big deal, because you probably already have a Torx driver. But it is sort of cool to think that, hey man, if you just have 1 or 2 knives, you don't have to go out and get a new Torx driver, because why else would you need one of those? So yeah, having the hex hardware is, I think, a pretty good thing. And it is closer to like the T8 size than T6, except for on the clip screws. So again, I really like that hardware. All right, so let's talk about the fun stuff, the action and the lockup. So it's super snappy, zero issues with the way it deploys. The centering is pretty darn good. There's no recoil or like kickback when you like get it open, so it doesn't bounce the way I've seen some other autos. And again, I haven't handled that many very expensive autos, so you know, my limited experience, I have seen some weird, odd things, but this just feels really clean, very snappy, very clean, very quick. So the action on this knife is really satisfying. The spring tension is pretty darn good, but as you can see, opening and closing one-handed is not an issue whatsoever. Especially holding onto the clip for leverage as you close it works just fine. Disengagement is simple, just a solid snappy action. So yeah, very good stuff here. You know, the button, and I have never really had much fear with these, like deploying them in my pocket, just because, you know, I've done enough like testing where you realize, all right, it's going to take a hell of a lot for this thing to try to fire in your pocket or something, right? And so that's just fine. The lockup, which is always a concern for me with autos, because almost every auto, at least the OTF specifically, but a lot of autos just don't have that perfect lockup, and it's hard to get that perfect lockup, and especially once you lose it, and this knife is very solid. So yeah, I mean, as far as the construction goes, it's really impressing me. And the thing about it is, it's tough, because like I said at the beginning of the video, I would really like, I've been thinking about getting a Protech, and you know, this one isn't really, just with that blade shape, the one that I would want to EDC all the time, but darn it, it works, and I really have started to like the knife. So I can't really decide what to do with it, if I'm going to move on from it and get something different, or just stick with it. But as it is, I think it's a pretty darn good knife, and I think these come in at $150. I might be wrong. I saw them. I saw some listed on Blade HQ at $150. If I'm wrong, I'll annotate that right here. But around $150 for this is like, that's a great deal, I think. Because autos, in my experience and what I know, autos generally run a little bit more expensive than manuals, specifically with like Benchmades and stuff like that. You know, if you want a Benchmade, the auto version is going to be a lot more expensive than the manual version. That's just how it is. So $150, USA made, you know, 154 cm, pretty good materials. Yeah, it's a pretty darn good deal. It's a good knife, and I'm happy with it. So that's my take on the Protech Godson. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know about all that. Again, keep an eye on the description. Depending on where you're watching this or when you're watching this, Jeff Jewell might have a video posted about it, so check out his take as well. All right, thanks again, guys. Take care and have a good one.